Welcome to the first video in my new series. I've spent pretty much my entire adult life learning the best ways to get in shape, to moving properly, to getting more energy, and to properly align posture. So I've broken it all down into very thorough, easy to understand sections, and that's what I want to share with you today. Now you might be thinking,
well, that all sounds great, Evan, but how am I supposed to work out? I have no spare time, and I'm freaking exhausted, and even if I wanted to, I have no equipment or I have no idea what to do.
Don't worry about any of that. I got you covered. A lot of what I talk about, you can do wherever you are without any special equipment. Plus, I want to help out as many people as I can with this information, so it doesn't matter if you're a man, a woman, a stay-at-home, a new mother, you're retired. These tips can help anyone who wants to get in shape, eliminate pain, and increase mobility in a way that makes total sense. I'm going to break down this information into 4 videos so it's easier to absorb, as each section will be quite extensive. In this video, first I will quickly explain why I feel I'm qualified to share this type of information. Then for the rest of the video, I'm going to talk about what your core is, why it's so important, how it's often neglected, and how to properly engage it. Then I'm going to explain how to properly align your posture so you can begin your journey to a pain-free, highly mobile future. So if you like the idea of having more energy, less pain, more confidence, better mental health, then let's get started right now.
Daddy, 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 Daddy!
Let me quickly explain why I feel like I'm qualified to offer this information. In 2013, I got my personal training certification, and I worked in the weight room for 2 of our local municipalities. I used that time to pick hundreds of brains and talk with all kinds of people about what worked for them and what didn't. I used that experience to optimize my own training techniques and philosophies. Also, just a quick disclaimer before I move on, if you have any pain, go see a specialist. If any of the movements I suggest hurt when you do it, don't do it. It shouldn't though. And if it does hurt, that might be an indicator you need some physio or something else. So please be mindful. First, what is your core? Everyone defines this differently. Here's how I like to do it. Imagine you have this big rib cage and all these bones up high, and you have these big bones in your hips down below. Then you have this little thin bit of bone in the middle supporting it all called your spine. Your core is what holds everything together to support your spine so you don't flop around. Now, what happens when you have a weak core? First, imagine bowling pins. When they're set up like usual, they knock over easy. Now picture those bowling pins cramped together really tight, like a rugby scrum. They're not so easy to knock over now, right? That's essentially what we want to happen to your spine. Your core muscles essentially wrap around your middle like saran wrap, and it holds your guts nice and tight together to support your spine. Now there's a lot more to it than that, but hopefully you're with me so far. When your core is weak, it allows your spine to get out of whack, which creates all sorts of imbalances. And when your body is imbalanced, you don't use the correct muscles to function properly. So you end up using your strongest muscles, which might be the wrong muscles, to compensate for weaker ones. This ultimately creates all sorts of tight and loose muscles. Like imagine pulling some random parts of your shoelaces really tight and then functioning like this all the time. That's essentially what happens with most people's bodies. As a result of living like this, you will develop all kinds of chronic pains, and they will be incredibly hard to diagnose because there will be so many layers of wrong movement going on. You will have a nightmare trying to figure out what the actual problem is. You might say, ouch doc, I have hip pain. But really, if you diagnose it properly, you realize that the hip pain is caused from your knee not bending properly. And your knee isn't tracking properly because your feet are out of alignment when you stand, so now you have weak feet and you don't stand properly. Layers of issues. Your physio won't be able to figure all of that out in an hour, so they'll work on your hip because that's what you went there for. You might get temporary relief, but most likely you'll have the same problem year after year after year that will come and go. Now, remember how I said your core is like saran wrap? As we age and our muscles get weaker, gravity does its thing, so where do you think everything goes? Down. And what's on the bottom of your core? It's your pelvic floor. And guys, I'm talking about you here too. This is very important to realize because your pelvic floor needs to be worked too. This is huge and it's often neglected for most people, especially men. And when men have weak pelvic floors, which is more common than you think, they can experience all kinds of pain in places they won't like to experience pain. I just want to get in your head a little bit here. It's not all bench press and squats to having a healthy body. One last thing about the core is how to engage it. You pull your belly button towards your spine, and the other is to brace like someone's gonna punch you right in the stomach. You kind of clamp down. This, paired with Kegels, which is basically the muscle you use to stop the flow of urination, the squeeze. Try it right now. Try and hold the squeeze. If it's hard to do for more than a few seconds, that's because it's weak. So tightening your core and doing Kegels are things you can and should do all the time, no matter who you are. Holding groceries? Tighten your core. Sitting there in the middle of the night with a screaming baby? Do some Kegels. Going for a walk? Tighten that core. Waiting in line? Do both. Over time, you will be amazed how much these two things will help you. Also, you will want to tighten that core while doing exercise. This is critical. Every single exercise. But more on that in the next videos. Having a tight core that supports your spine is the base for proper posture. So now, let's talk about your posture. Posture is the foundation to having a pain-free future. Everything we do and everything I talk about is centered around making sure that foundation is strong. Everything we do needs to reinforce good posture. If you do exercise while your posture is bad, you're swimming upstream. Your body is essentially stacked up like blocks. So if your head juts out, or your hips are misaligned, or the blocks aren't lined up straight in a line, gravity will weigh everything down and work against you, causing pain. It will punish you. Imagine holding a bowling ball in your hand and you rest your elbow on a table. It's easiest to hold up when it's straight. Now put it on an angle. It got a lot heavier and it's not so easy to hold up, right? Well, that's like your neck holding your head up. That's what so many people do all the time. Their head juts out, that bowling ball is on an angle. No wonder they get neck pain and headaches. It's so important that you align everything so you can have the most range of motion within your joints. Because to me, being fit is about maximum mobility and having no pain with those movements. Here's a quick tip. You can use a mirror or a camera or a person to visually align yourself. What you are looking for is your ear, shoulder, hip, and knee, and your ankle to stack. That's a great starting point. Aim for that straight line. And another thing to keep in mind before I go further, feet position. Part of having great posture is we want to make sure our base is right. We want our feet under our hips, pointing more or less straight. And we want to distribute the weight evenly. Imagine your hip, knee, and ankle are like a train track. If it bends at an angle, the train is off the track. Also, if you notice you stand to one side or you lean on one foot, you're putting a lot of pressure on the hip joint. Distribute that weight. Standing up straight, imagine like a string is pulling you from the top of your head. Align your feet under your hips, tighten your core, and squeeze your glutes. This will help keep your hips flat. Here is a simple trick you can use to have good posture. Get a broomstick and put it behind you. Touch it to the 3 aligning points: your sacrum, or let's just say your butt, your shoulder blades, and the back of your head. Now bend. See what happens. What you want to eventually be able to do is squat and bend with keeping those points in alignment. This is important because it uses the glutes, and your glutes are the biggest muscle in your body, so we want to use them all the time. When people bend with their backs, they're using little tiny muscles that get exhausted quickly. We want to hinge at the hips. Here's another neat way to start moving right. Go to a wall, stand with your heels about 6 inches away, and while keeping your back straight, touch your butt to the wall. Keep your legs straight too. You'll move like a clamshell. So say if you dropped something or you were going to bend over to open a drawer, this is how you should start the movement, by hinging at the hips. One last thing I want to mention is your shoulders. You might have noticed that you have one shoulder higher than the other. I do. Most people do. Now, when I was in high school, I used to stand on one hip with my backpack over one shoulder. This created practically a lifetime of hip and shoulder pain. I used to try and correct that by squeezing my back to align myself properly. This created nasty rib pain, and only once I used to properly engage my core did that pain and problem fix itself. Let me elaborate on that last part. When I said I learned how to use my core, here's an awesome way to really help align your spine. You do it by creating as much space as possible between your ribs and your hips. You almost put your chest up. Then you engage or clamp like I mentioned earlier. This will straighten your thoracic spine and set you up with awesome alignment. So instead of fixing your shoulders or your back by squeezing your back muscles, again, remember how I mentioned using small muscles to do a big job creates tired muscles? So instead of squeezing, we do it by creating separation from your ribs and your hips and letting your core do what it's supposed to do. This helped me so much. Muscles are like a person holding on to a rope. If it's a small muscle and it's being pulled on hard, eventually it'll get tired and angry. People with bad posture have angry muscles all the time. Okay, hopefully you now have a better understanding of what we are working towards with proper alignment. We want to stack ourselves up correctly so our muscles don't have to do any extra work than they should. We don't want them to be angry. Once we have the correct alignment, we use our core to keep that structure tight. Over the next few videos, I will explain how we can go even further to support that structure that we have just created, and how to optimize it so we become a well-tuned machine. Please click on the thumbs up if you got value from today's video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. In the next video, I'm going to talk about what I think is the most effective way to lose weight. So please stay tuned for that one. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on The Sad Life.